Alright, so it is 7 o'clock here at the Milwaukee Makerspace. So it is time for Model Monday. We'll go ahead and kind of jump right into today's project. We got new student here in class, so we're going to kind of do a little refresher on the drawing environment, and then we'll kind of jump right into the next in our little ornament series that we're doing in an effort to cover our Christmas tree here at the Makerspace with holiday cheer and 3D printed goodness and CNC cut stuff. We're drawing another Christmas ornament. This will kind of be a fun one. So I think we're going to try to make an ornament that could only be 3D printed. With the power of extruded plastic, we will make an ornament with a present inside of it. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So I'm going to start by creating a new document. So I'm going to open, or up here in Fusion is a tabbed workspace. So up here at the top, I've got a couple of tabs open. You'll just have one open here. And to start a new file, if you need to, we're going to go ahead and click that little plus button there. Now we've got our brand new document here, and we can see all of my drawing tools are all at the top here. So in general in this class, we'll start by creating sketches. And then we'll take those sketches and we'll use things in this create menu in order to make them three-dimensional. So we'll take those two-dimensional objects and turn them into three-dimensional shapes. And let's kind of give you an example of that right now. So let's go ahead and click on the create menu and then choose create sketch. Now, one of the wonderful things about Fusion 360 is all of the tool tips. So if I'm not sure what to do, if I just stop moving my mouse, it's literally going to tell me what to do. So it says here to select a plane or plein air face. And all of the tools that you use in Fusion will have like multiple steps. So the first step in making a sketch is to select the two-dimensional surface that you're going to draw this sketch on. And Fusion gives you these three surfaces that we can start with. If we want to see these a little bit more clearly, we can use our navigation cube up in the top right-hand corner. So up here in the top right-hand corner, I can hover over these different things with my mouse and they highlight blue. I could click on any of these surfaces and kind of spin right around to looking at that particular surface. Or I can click and drag on this cube and kind of move around in a little bit more finite way. Sometimes I find it easy to get disoriented when you're looking at something in Fusion, so it's handy just to kind of give this a little twiddle and kind of get your bearings and figure out where you are. For our purposes right now, it doesn't really matter which drawing surface we pick, but I'm going to choose this one that represents the front. And if I hover over that surface and click on it, now we're in our drawing. Now we're editing a sketch. So we can tell we're editing a sketch because we got our sketch palette open here. This is our sketch window here, and we've got all these tools at the top have changed to sketching tools. And now we can use said sketching tools. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the create menu. I'm going to scroll down to rectangle, and I'm going to choose to make a center rectangle. This is kind of important. Normally a two-point rectangle is just the easiest rectangle to make, but for today's project, a center rectangle is going to be the way to go, because we're going to locate everything in our drawing today around our origin. So the origin is the center of our drawing world. The center of the drawing universe is right here at kind of the intersection of these two axes. And again, if I don't know what to do, I can stop moving my mouse and it says, oh look, I'm supposed to place the center point of this center rectangle that we're creating here. So I'll go ahead and click one time to place that center point. And now I'm just going to move my mouse out. I'm not clicking and dragging, I'm clicking and moving. And now we see we have numbers that are appearing. I always encourage beginners to, as soon as you can see numbers, let go of your mouse, trust in the force and the power of your keyboard, and just start typing numbers. In theory, you will know what dimensions you'll want to make something when you're going to make it. So you should, use those powers and do that. For our purposes here, we'd like to make this a 1" by 1" cube. So if I hit the 1 key and then to bounce back and forth between my height and width measurements here, I can use my tab key. So I got 1" by 1". And that looks like a real nice cube, and I'm going to go ahead and click enter. That there's the finest cube I ever did see, or box I ever did see. Alright, so and now we've got a box drawn. If we're done with this sketch, in which case, in our case we are, we can either click the Finish Sketch icon at the top right-hand corner, or we can click the Finish Sketch button in our sketch palette. So either one of those will work. As soon as you hit that Finish Sketch button, all of your measurements go away, in which case you should immediately freak out because you've done something wrong. No, so the measurements have gone away because we're no longer editing that sketch. So we're not looking at all the associated dimensions with that sketch because we're not editing it. However, two things have happened. So as we start drawing things, over in our browser in the left-hand side, this browser is going to grow as we draw things and make them three-dimensional and make sketches. So for example, because we've made a sketch, we now have a folder over here that I can use this triangle to spin down and view called Sketches. And inside of that Sketches folder is our first sketch. So sketch 1 here is a terrible name for that box. It should be called box. I don't know why Fusion called it sketch 1 because clearly it's a box. So we're going to click on it one time and then pause and click again. So click one time, pause, click again. And now we can rename this box. I always encourage people to get in the habit of naming their sketches, naming their bodies, name those things. It just, because inevitably you're going to have to go back to this sketch at some point in time. And if it's just called sketch 27 and you've got 50 other sketches, good luck. So just get in that habit right away. It's a good habit to get into. Do it. Okay, so enough preaching there. The next thing that we will see changing in addition to our browser here is down at the very bottom. We've got kind of a timeline of things that are happening down here. So we've only got one icon in this timeline, and that is that sketch folder. If I hover over it, you can see it's when I made my box sketch. Let's do another thing, and then you can see that timeline grow a little bit. So down, let's extrude that box. So in our Create menu, if we grab our Extrude tool, and I'm going to choose to extrude this. Now, so these Create windows here, most of the things in the Create menu will give you a window that's similar to this, where you will have to first choose the profile that you want to do whatever to, in our case extrude, and then the rest of this is like how to do that. So for example, we could enter in a distance here of 1 inch, and I can use my navigation cube up in the top right hand corner to kind of look at this in a little bit more three-dimensional way, and you can see that my box is now a cube. Now the other options here are ways to tweak how this extrusion is being made. So, for example, the start of this extrusion right now is happening at the profile plane. So it's happening at the place where my sketch was. We could choose to make this from an offset plane. In fact, we're going to do that later. So I'm not going to mess around with that right now because we'll show you that in the next sketch probably. I will, we're going to do that in the next sketch too. Yeah, just distance of 1 inch because we're going to cover that in the next one. The one thing we're not going to cover in the next is you could do a taper here. So I could choose to make this -10 and I could taper it, or I could make it a +10 and I could expand it. Again, we don't want to do that, but just know that that's an option. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK. Alright, so now we've got a bodies folder over here in our browser. And our bodies folder has a body in it. And like I said, it's a good habit to get in the it is a good practice to get in the habit of naming things. So I'm going to go ahead and rename that to my box. And I can turn my sketch off if I don't need to see that anymore. So now we've created a shape. Sweet. Pat yourself on the back if this is your first box. We also have a second icon down here in our timeline. So now we can make use of the feature in Fusion 360 that I think is really handy, which is it's a parametric design software. So at any point, I can go back into the past and I can change something about like this sketch, and then when I come into the present, those sketches will be reflected in my cube. So down here, this sketch, I can either right click on it down here in my timeline and I could say edit sketch, or I could right click on it in my sketches folder and I can say edit sketch. And now I go back in time, so the extrude icon down here in our timeline is still there, it's just grayed out. And we're back to that place where I was creating this sketch. And if I wanted to, I could change one of these dimensions. Let's say I'll double click on that one and make it a 2 inch. And then when I say finish sketch, now when I come back to the present, now you can see that has been automatically reflected in our extrusion. Excuse me. We actually want that to be a 1 by 1 inch. So if you did change that, go ahead and change it back to 1. I just wanted to illustrate that you could make that adjustment and that it would be reflected in your future steps. The more complicated, the further you go back in time, the more likelihood there is of something not quite working out so great when you come into the present. Parametric, you know, the further you go into the past, the more you change, the more you're going to change your present. There's a Back to the Future reference here that is escaping me right now, but you should probably try to draw things right the first time. Okay, cool. So I'd like to make this box look like a present for our Christmas ornament here. So in order to do that, I'd like to draw a ribbon around this box. So let's make a new sketch. So I'm going to go up here to my Create menu, and I'm going to choose Create Sketch here. I'm going to, now in addition to those 3 drawing surfaces that I had, I can draw on any flat surface. So any one of these surfaces of my cube I can choose as a drawing surface. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick one as the plane or plein air face that I'm going to draw on. And now I spin around so I'm looking right at it. Now if we want to make a ribbon that wraps all the way around this box, we could choose to grab our rectangle tool and try to make a rectangle that's all the way around this uniformly. However, there is an option here in the Modify menu called Offset. So what offset allows us to do is to hover over an edge or a sketch line and click on it, and it will just automatically make an offset all the way around uniformly. And I'm going to make this real little. It's just going to be like 0.02 inches. That'd probably print. Maybe it should be like 0.04. That'll definitely register to print. And then I'm going to say OK. So now we've got a ribbon that runs all the way around our box here, and we can say Finish Sketch. Now we've got another sketch over here in our Sketches folder that we can name. This is our ribbon. And if I look at this at a little bit more three-dimensional view, we can choose to extrude that ribbon. So let's go ahead and click on our Create menu and then come down to the Extrude option here. And I'm going to go ahead and pick on that outside edge that is my ribbon here. I wonder, can I pick... Nope, I got to click on it here in my drawing surface. Sometimes you can click on items in your browser instead of clicking on things in your drawing surface, but in this case you do actually need to click on the drawing surface. Now, I mentioned that we would cover some of the other things in this extrude window, and now is the time we're going to do that. So the first time we extruded something, we extruded it from the profile plane. This time let's choose to extrude it from an offset.
In the extrude menu.
You're not seeing an extrude menu?
Well, I want to create, I don't see extrude.
Should be...
Everything's selected on something or not.
Do you see a sketch palette?
Sketch palette? Yeah, I mean...
So you'll need to say Finish Sketch.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Yeah.
I want to create extrude, okay.
There you go. Yeah, so now you'll be able to click on that outside edge that we just made. And now the item that I was going to mention here in our extrude menu is the first time we extruded from the profile plane. If we change this to an offset, because what we really want to do is we want our ribbon to be in the middle of our box. So if we make this start from an offset of -1/2 inch, because our box is 1 inch. So if we start at -1/2 inch, our start of our extrusion, oh, that's 5, I missed my point. Our start of our extrusion plane will be right in the middle, and like I can demonstrate this by grabbing my little arrow here and extruding that out, and you can see that that starts from the middle of our box and comes out from there. I can also, because I want this to start in the middle and expand out in both directions, I can change the direction option here. Instead of extruding this in one direction, I'm going to choose to extrude it symmetrically. And if I go symmetrically, 0.1 inches is probably fine. And I think join is a fine operation here. So the one thing I didn't mention in that with that first extrude here is the operation at the bottom here. There'll be an operation with everything that you pick in the Create menu. And right now, when we first extruded something, it was set to New Body. This time around, the default is to Join here. So if I choose this Join as an option, it will make this ribbon part of the same body as the box body, which is fine, but just know that you could choose to make it a new body, and then you would have two bodies over here, one that's your box and one that is just this ring that goes around the outside of it. Alright, so I'm going to keep that at join, and I'm going to say OK. Now I'd like to have a ribbon that goes the other way around this box here. So I'd also like to have a bow on our box. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hide my ribbon sketch here. And I'm going to choose to draw another sketch. And I'm going to do that by go ahead and click on Create and then Create Sketch. Now I'm going to spin around and pick the face that I'm going to draw on, because so initially when I drew my first ribbon I drew on this face. Now we'll want to pick a face that is opposite, I guess adjacent to that, so we're drawing in kind of the opposite direction here to draw our bow and the other part of our ribbon here. Alright. Are you guys following me? Kind of? Kinda? My network connection keeps dropping out, so sorry for people at home. Let's reconnect again. Alright. So, this time around, we need to draw some geometry here. Or we need to project some geometry. So the first time we drew a sketch on the side of our box, we were able to pick this face right here, and we had some built-in edges that were kind of associated with that face, and we were able to just offset that without having to draw anything. This time around, we don't have all that luxury. So if I choose my offset tool, just like we did the first time, because I picked this face here as the face I was going to make my sketch on, I have lines around there, but I don't have a line that goes around like the whole thing here, which is what I really need. So in order to create that, we can use the option from our Create menu that is called Project. So if we come down in our Create menu to Project/Include, and then over to Project, it's also the P key on the keyboard.
Carl?
Yeah.
When we made the ribbon around, instead of joining, if we had made that a new body, we could have just turned off the visibility of that, and when you clicked on the visible face, that ribbon's not there to bugger up your selection.
100%. That is definitely an option. So, you know, what Mike is saying is, instead of this where we have to go in now and project some geometry over, that instead of, I'm going to delete this sketch. Instead of choosing, in fact, we can still do that. So here, this extrude option here, because Fusion is parametric, I can right click on it and I can say edit feature. And now instead of join, I can make this new body. So instead of that operation down at the bottom being join, if we choose to make that operation a new body and say OK, now we have two bodies over here in our bodies folder. One that's our box and one that's our ribbon. And now if I do that again, if I click on Create and then Create Sketch, when I hover over the side here and choose that as the face that I want to create my sketch on, now you can see it's just like we did the first time, where if I grab my offset tool by clicking on Modify and then Offset, now we can do it just like we did the first time. Yeah, now we can do it just like we did the first time. And we can say, okay there. I'll go ahead and say finish sketch. Another way that you could do this, just in the interest of showing lots of different ways, is down here in our timeline. If we had chose to make this extrude something that we joined to this box, we can still go back in time before we did that, and we could make the other sketch on the side of the box before we made our extrude. So you can go back in time and make a new sketch, and then when you go on the other side of your extrude, then you have two sketches that happened before that extrude, and only one of which you've extruded so far, and then you can go extrude the second one. But so lots of ways. Thank you for the encouragement, Mike. In this sketch with our ribbon here, I'm gonna go and edit this because we're not quite done. So I'm gonna go say edit sketch, and now I mentioned it would be cool to have a bow that is associated with this package here, this little present, because it doesn't look like a present unless it's got a bow on the top. And that will also give us an excuse to use some more sketch tools. So we don't have to just make boxes, we can also make fun curvy lines. So up here in our create menu, I'm going to choose to make just a line to start off with. I often am using the mirror command to do things, and my kind of go-to method is to pick the center of my drawing before I draw my center line first and then draw 1/2. So that's kind of the approach we're taking here. If I hover my mouse over what is near the middle of this line, in fact right at the middle of this line, I get a little icon that's popping up here. There are a few of these icons that Fusion gives us as we're hovering over our document. So if I hover over a corner, over this corner here, I get a little blue box that's telling me that that's an end point. And if I hover over the middle, that's telling me that that is a midpoint. So I'm kind of snapping right to the middle of that line segment. And that is indeed what I want to do. So if I click on that and then move my mouse upward, let's go with 0.08, twice the thickness of our ribbon so far. That seems decent. And I'm going to hit enter. Now from this line, I'm going to make the kind of the bulb of my bow. So I'll come down here to the create menu, like kind of the knot part of the bow, and I'm going to do that with the Ellipse Tool. So Ellipse Tool, and again, tools are great in Fusion. The tool tips are great in Fusion, because if you've never used a tool, these tool tips show you, tell you what the tool does, and also a lot of times how to use the tool. So here it says we're supposed to select the center point of the ellipse, and then select the center point of the ellipse, select the second point to define the first axis, select the third point to define a point on the ellipse. So we're basically picking two sides in the center here. So if I go ahead and choose that Ellipse tool, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. I'm going to again hover over the midpoint of that line so I get that little blue triangle that pops up. And I'm going to click to place that center point. Now I'm going to move my mouse up to the end point of that line and kind of define the height of my ellipse. And click again for that second point. And now the third point here is where I define a point on the ellipse. So I can define a point up here, I can define a point down here. I just want to make it roughly the size of my bow. I feel like that makes sense to have about the size of my bow. And I'm going to go ahead and click to place that other point. So that is the knot of our bow. And now we need some the ribbons of our bow here. So in order to draw the ribbons of my bow, I'm going to come down here to the Create menu, and then I'm going to scroll down to the Spline tool. So if you've ever used Illustrator or Photoshop, the pen tools in those softwares are very similar to the Fit Point Spline option. So if I choose that Fit Point Spline option, and if I just stop moving my mouse, it says, hey, place the first point. I'm going to place this first point somewhere on my ellipse, probably pretty close to the midpoint here at the far edge of my ellipse. And I'm going to click and place that point, and now I'm going to move my mouse out, and I get just a straight line to start off with. But after I place my first point, I start to see what's going on with this tool here. So now I can bend and twist this line and create a nice smooth curve here. So I'm just going to place a couple of points, something like this. And then to finish using this tool, there's a little circle with the checkbox in it that turns green if you hover over it. That is the, hey, I'm done using this tool option. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Now if you want to, you can adjust these points after the fact. I'm pretty happy with mine, but just know that that's an option for you. That you can go ahead and tweak the shape a little bit to your heart's content. I am gonna, however, choose to make an offset of that shape, because our bow is not a solid object. It's like a ribbon with some thickness. So we can do that by using that offset tool again. So in the Modify menu, I'll come down to Offset, and then I'll choose that sketch curve, that spline curve that I made, and I'll give it a thickness that's something similar to what we did with our ribbon. You can do this inside or outside. I leave that in your capable hands. Although if you do this outside, I will say in my case, it's not connecting this line to this ellipse, and if we do that outside, you'll need to go ahead and connect those things together. But if we do it inside, and we get a nice connected shape like that, like here the shape is not connected, here the shape is fully enclosed, so you definitely want to have a fully enclosed shape there. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK on my offset window here. So now we've got the loop part of our knot. Now we need the tail part. So I'm going to use the Spline tool again to draw that tail part. So I'll come down here to the Create menu, and then I'll come over to the Spline option and choose this Fit Point Spline option. And now I just need to give it a little curve. It doesn't need to be a real long one, but I just drew a little line, a little tail at the end here. And the same way that I gave my bow thickness, I'm going to give my little tail thickness. So in our Create menu, the Modify menu, I'm going to find that offset command one more time. Give it a little tail here. And then we just need to connect these two dots here at the end. I'm going to do that with my line tool, and then I'll kind of do a check-in with you guys, see how you're doing. How are you guys doing? Yeah? You may kind of take a peek. Ah, you got a donut up at the top of your box.
Yeah.
Nice.
I couldn't figure out where the ellipse was, but I found chlorides.
Oh, all right, cool.
But then I don't know what I did here, where the extrusion didn't go around the box; it just went on the top.
Oh, we must have missed. So if you
But then I got one, and I was gonna go put another one on there.
maybe you just didn't grab that part of the extrusion for some reason. Like it's one of these extrudes down here at the bottom. So you might have to like right click on it and say edit feature.
It's gotta be this one, I think.
Right click. Maybe you have to say finish sketch. No, there you go. Now you can say edit feature. Oh, so you extruded it up. Is that right?
Ah, so it would be symmetric, maybe?
Oh, I see. You drew each.
I didn't on the other one, just on, apparently on this one.
Okay, right on. How are you doing, Mike?
Okay, I was trying to jump ahead and mirror,
Ah, you got a big bow.
and it didn't like my line here.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm gonna say hell with it, and I'll draw another line.
All right. I support it.
Okay. So we go, well, I'll let you talk. I don't
Yeah,
wanna
so that's
jump
going to be
ahead.
my next step here. So some things that I'll want to make sure before I mirror this over is I want to have some like fully enclosed shapes here. So as I hover over these things, because eventually we're gonna extrude this, we're gonna extrude this, and we're gonna extrude this. So I want to make sure that these are right now before I mirror them over, because that'll be less correction I have to do later. And now that these are all fully enclosed shapes, I can extrude them. So I'm gonna come over to I'm sorry, not extrude them. I can mirror them. So I'm gonna go grab my mirror tool, which is in the create menu. So if we choose create and then come down to this mirror option, this is a great option when you've got some complicated geometry that you don't want to have to draw twice in exactly the same way. We're going to choose first the objects that we're going to mirror. So for me, it's going to be all of these lines here. So all those splines that I made and all of the offsets that I made. And then I'm going to choose as my mirror line the line that runs down the center of my ellipse. And for me this works. Is that not working for you, Mike?
It didn't let me choose the center line, so I drew a new line, and I says, okay, you win this time, and I just went with the new line.
And that works?
That worked.
All right, cool. All right, so, and then I'm going to say okay. And now, so I'm not sure why it does this. This happened in my test sketch too. I've got all sorts of these green lines that are all over the place now. I think these are representing my splines in some way, shape, or form. Those lines are not real geometry that you can extrude. They're just, I don't know, reference geometry. I'm not sure what they're illustrating. but they're illustrating something. And now that we've drawn our bow, I can go ahead and say finish sketch, and now we can extrude said bow. So I'll come over here and we'll extrude this the same way we extruded the ribbon the first time. So I'll go up here to the create menu and I'll choose this extrude option. And then I'm going to click on that ribbon that wraps all the way around the outside of my package. And then all of the parts of my bow, and I've got some parts that I'm going to kind of zoom in here and make sure that I get all the little kibbles that are in between there. And now the very same way we did that first ribbon, we're going to do this one. So we extruded this not from starting from the profile plane, but we extruded starting from an offset. That offset was like right in the middle of our package. So my package was 1 inch, so we're going to do negative 0.5 inches. If you do 0.5, it will end up out in the middle of nowhere. So a negative 0.5 is important. Sometimes negative and positive numbers are weird in Fusion, so if you're expecting it to be somewhere and it's not where you think it's supposed, where you thought it was going to be, you can try switching a negative to a positive, which is always the best practice for life anyway. You know, turn that frown upside down. All right, so, and then the direction here, we're not going to do a direction that is one side. We're going to do a direction that is symmetric. And that way we extrude out, let me kind of illustrate what the difference would be. So here's symmetric, and we could see we're at equidistant on both sides of the box. And if I just keep it on one side, then you can see it just extrudes from this profile plane, which is right in the middle, out to one side. So we do indeed, symmetric is the way to go there. And instead of making this a cut, we could choose to, I'm going to make this a join, but you could choose to make this a new body if you wanted to. So if you wanted to make this a new body, then you'd have 3 bodies over here. One is the box, one is the ribbon, and then one is this bow here. But I'm going to choose to join all these things together here at this point and say OK. Now I've got another sketch over here. I got a little ahead of myself. I've got a sketch called Sketch 4. This is really my bow sketch. And because I chose to join those things, it joined them into this body called ribbon. But I can rename that now to a body called gift. It's my gift. Alright, so the last thing we want to do to this ornament here is I'd like to enclose it. So, because right now this is a shape that you could make with lots of different tools, right? You could whittle this with a carving knife, or cut it with a bandsaw blade. But I'd like to make something that could only be 3D printed. So what I'd like to do is encase this in a sphere that we cut some holes in so you can see the present on the inside. And the way that we are going to do this is by grabbing our, actually, do we have to locate a point first? I think I need a plane right in the middle of this box. Gosh, I think I missed a step way back here, didn't I? I should have started that. Alright, so we're going to make do. So, because I want to have a sphere that has the same center point as my box's center point. So, how are we going to do that? We're going to go ahead and we're going to make a offset plane. So I'm going to come down to construct and then offset plane. And I'm going to make that offset plane from one of these sides. So we're making a new construction surface. So I'm going to go ahead and up until this point we've been using the existing 3 construction surfaces that Fusion gives us, or a face that we have here, right? But we can make new construction surfaces based on geometry that we have. So if I choose from this construct menu this offset plane option, and now I choose as the plane that is my reference any side of my box, not the side of your ribbon, but any side of the box. And now this is similar to like that offset extrusion. So this plane, we are going to offset a negative 0.5 inches. And we know that will be right in the middle of our box now. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. Now, these planes, they go on an infinite amount of distance. They extend out infinitely, but it only shows you a surface or a size. This little yellow box is based on the object that you chose to offset it from. So for me, I like to come in here, and if I hover over these edges, I can expand them out just so they're a little bit easier to see. Sometimes you'll make a plane that is based on a very small plane, and it's difficult to click on it. So if I hover over the edges of these planes, I can expand them out so they're a little bit easy to see and utilize. Also, just as kind of like a pet peeve of mine, I like it when my drawing planes are roughly the size of the thing that's on them, because I'm pretty good at renaming my sketches and my bodies. I really suck at renaming my planes and my axes, because like, what do you call this? I mean, I guess we could call this, instead of plane 1, we could call it mid box, but it's real easy to, you get enough of these going on and you don't remember what you called it, and it might as well just be called construction plane 1. So, alright, so we made that construction plane because we're going to make a sphere, and we're going to make a sphere using, do I want to do that method? You know what, instead of, yeah, let's do that. It'll be easier. All right, so we'll go down here to the Create menu and then choose this Sphere option. Now, even though we're jumping right to making a 3-dimensional shape, we still have to click on a drawing surface to draw on. So if I hover over this plane that we just made, or I can click on the plane in my browser. So if it's one of those cases where it's difficult to click on the plane in your drawing view, you can click on the plane in your browser in the construction folder. That will work just fine. And now I'm going to place the center point. That's what I was afraid of. We don't have a good center point to pick on, so I'm just going to kind of guesstimate the center here of my sphere. That'll be close enough. Alright, so the center of my sphere, and now we can specify a diameter. And my diameter is going to be 2.5 inches because that is the absolute biggest I can print on my resin printer, and that's where I'm going to print this. So 2.5 inches. Now the default here is cut, and we obviously do not want to cut because we'd be like basically deleting our entire model. So this we're going to change to new body. And then I'm going to say OK. Now we basically have a big giant sphere here, big solid sphere that is encompassing our original gift, right? And if I want to hollow that sphere out, I can do that with a tool in the Modify menu that we don't use a whole lot, the Shell command. So in the Modify menu, I can come down to the fourth option from the top. The fourth option from the top is this Shell tool here. And now if I select the face or body that I want to shell out, so I can either click on the body in my bodies folder, or I can click on this sphere out here in my drawing view, and I can give it a thickness of like 0.1 inches. Inside is fine for us, and I'll say OK. Now we have a hollow sphere. You just can't tell. So we need to do one last thing, one last drawing. So here, let me rename this body. This is our it's our sphere. The last thing we need to do is to cut some holes in this sphere so we can see the package on the inside. So from the Modify menu here, no, I'm sorry, from the Create menu, I'm going to choose to create a sketch. And it doesn't really matter where you create this sketch. It probably does actually. I'm going to choose to create this sketch. You know what? I'm going to choose to make it on my midplane. We got that midplane for a reason, right? So I'm going to make this sketch on that mid box plane that I drew, that I created here. Oh, kind of. That kind of works. All right, so now I'm going to draw a line. Gosh, I really want to know where the center of this sphere is. So before I draw a line, I'm going to use that trick that I was going to show you initially. So what I'd like to know is where the middle of this sphere is. And I can do that if I project the geometry that make up this sphere onto this surface. So from the Create menu, I can scroll down here to the Project Include option and choose this Project option here. The selection filter that I want to use is not specified entities, although that would work just fine. I actually want to project an entire body, and the body that I want to pick is this sphere here. So I can either click the sphere in my browser in my bodies folder, or in my drawing view here. Either one of these will work just fine. And you can see I've got one selected, and then I say OK, and now we've got a nice purple line there. But in addition to that purple line, when I hover over it, I've got a center point. So now that I see where the center of that sphere is, I can grab my line tool. So in the Create menu, I'll come over here to Line, and I'm gonna, oh, it's not gonna, there we go. Now I can, if I get near the center of that line, it gives me a little circle icon, and I can place that line and draw it straight up like 1 inch. I think will be good for me. And I'm going to draw another line from that same center point. I'm going to draw it straight over like 1/4 of an inch, so 0.25 inches. And I'm going to hit enter. And now I'm going to connect these two lines with an arc. So in the Create menu, I'll choose Arc, and then 3-point arc. And I'm just going to connect those two endpoints with an arc that, I don't know, looks something like that. I will say that the goal here is just to make a shape that we're going to use to cut out of our sphere here. So for me, I'm making kind of like this weird shape. And I'm going to use my mirror tool. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Create and then Mirror. And I'm going to mirror this curved line twice. So the first time I'm going to mirror it, I'm going to mirror it over one of my lines. I'm going to choose my straight up and down vertical line and say OK. And then I'll do that one more time. I'll grab my mirror command, and now I'm going to mirror both of these curved lines over my horizontal line there and say OK. I kind of want to tweak this a little bit, so it kind of comes in a little bit to a point, and I don't think I want that. So I can just click and hold on my curve, and you can see it's moving all of it at the same time. So this is something that's kind of interesting because I've mirrored this twice. That mirror, I guess that's technically a constraint. Mirror constraint is keeping all of those curves the same. So if you wanted to have a shape more like this, you certainly could. But I'm going to choose to have a shape that's more like that. And now that we've got kind of our cutout shape drawn, I'm going to go ahead and say Finish Sketch. And I'm going to extrude that cutout shape. So if I come up here to this Create menu, and then come down to this Extrude option, I can click on the parts that make up that shape, and I can extrude them out. Now you can see that this extrusion here is red, and that is because it is defaulting to this cut operation. And we do want to cut, but we want to be specific about the objects that we want to cut here. So if I spin that down, I want to cut my sphere. I don't want to cut my gift. So we just want to be kind of cutting holes in our sphere and not cutting holes in our gift. So I'm going to uncheck that and say OK. And then the last thing that we need to do here is to make that cutout pattern repeat around the outside of our sphere here. So we can see our gift floating in the inside from a lot of different angles. So in this Create menu, is it in Create? Yeah. We can choose to make a pattern. So I'll choose Create and then Pattern. The type of pattern that we want to make is a circular pattern. And this is kind of unusual. So normally, a lot of times we're making patterns of bodies, but in this case, we're going to make a pattern of a feature. So the pattern type, instead of faces, we're going to change that to features. What a feature is one of these things down here in our timeline. So down here in our timeline, the pattern that we are going to make this of is this extrude feature down here in our timeline. So I'll click on that as the feature that we're going to do, and then the axis that we're going to revolve this around is going to be this axis that was the center of that kind of cutout thing. And now I'm going to make 12 of them because Christmas, 12 days of Christmas. Were there like 12 wise men? There were probably 13 wise men.
Three.
3 wise men? I don't know
Apostles,
things.
12 apostles.
12 apostles. All right, yeah. You know, well, maybe you should just make 11 because, you know, do you really need to represent Judas on Christmas? No. Okay, so bad joke. All right, I'm going to say okay. And there we go. Now we've got our Christmas present in an ornament. So we got a sketch to name. This is my cutout. And there we go. So I'm not sure if we're going to draw another ornament next week. I don't know if people are... Yeah, I feel like we've drawn a couple. Maybe we'll do another Christmassy related project next week. Maybe we'll revive the AnyBox project that we did a couple years ago. But yeah, this is our project for the day. If you wanted to... you could turn that box at an angle. You could figure out how to suspend it on the inside of there by drawing another body. But I leave that in your capable hands. And until next week, thanks for joining us.